The second component of the evolution of the Bnei Israel from a family group into a nation was that of Geulah. One does not need to search far and wide throughout the texts to establish the role that Moshe Rabbeinu had as the facilitator of bringing the Bnei Israel from Egypt to a state of Geulah. And as we noted with respect to the Torah component, where there was a past and a future aspect to Moshe's involvement, similarly with respect to the Geulah, there is a past component and, according to the thesis of the Rebbe, a future component, also linked to Moshe Rabbeinu, at least on the spiritual level. This is reflected in a number of textual sources, one of which is a statement towards the end of Sefer Micha, in which Micha, in the name of God, states, Ki mei tzeitecha me'eretz Mitzrayim are'eno niflaot. The are'eno niflaot refers to a future messianic era, and a comparison is drawn between that future messianic era to the original Geulah from Eretz Mitzrayim. As with all text material, both secular and Judaic literature, the text can be approached from different standpoints. From the standpoint of Pshat, Micha 7:15 can be paraphrased to read, just as the redemption of Egypt came about through a miraculous process, so too the future redemption will involve God's intervention and come about through a metaphysical process. The Rebbe in the Sikha proposes a more nuanced interpretation drawn from the concepts of Sod, and that is, just as the redemption from Egypt was channeled through Moshe Rabbeinu, so too the future redemption will be channeled spiritually through Moshe Rabbeinu. Similarly, in the third component, that of Yerushat Haaretz, the ultimate end game of the first two components, Geulah and Torah, we also have a past and a future. The past is that it was only through the conversion of Eretz Canaan into Eretz Israel that many of the Taryag mitzvot could be fulfilled. The future aspect is tied into the Yemot HaMashiach, where the focus of much of Nevi'im deals with a future reinstitution of sovereignty over Eretz Israel post-Churban Bet HaMikdash. The Rebbe argues that in both aspects there would have to have been a spiritual connection between Moshe Rabbeinu and Yerushat Haaretz, which dovetails quite nicely into the interpretation offered by the Tzafnat Paneach as to why it was necessary for Moshe to physically view the land, as recorded in Devarim 34:4, drawn from the principles of Sod, Sheriat Moshe Haita Lekadesh Ha'avir, that spiritually, in doing so, in a process not necessarily understood by most, the Moshe was able to bring sanctity to the space of what was previously known as Eretz Canaan. While the role that Geulah plays in the end game of Yerushat Haaretz is self-evident, the role that Torah plays is touched upon by an extraordinarily lengthy commentary of the Ramban to Vayikra 18:25, and while the Rambam, looking at the text from the standpoint of Kabbalistic ideas, saw no conflict between Torah and Yerushat Haaretz, when the aspect of Yerushat Haaretz became a reality in modern times, this link became a source of immense tension, if not a battleground, for more than 100 years, and likely for many generations to come, as it touches upon the very essence of Jewish nationhood in a modern era. Secular Zionism, on the one hand, maintained that the modern-day equivalent of Yerushat Haaretz can and should be devoid of the Torah component, whereas for most of Orthodox Judaism up until 1948 viewed secular Zionism as an attempt to move the goalposts in terms of Jewish nationhood. At their extremes, the two positions were mutually exclusive. Over time, however, Jews throughout the world have adopted positions somewhere between the two extremes for which they are most comfortable.